Hey everyone, welcome back. We're diving into something super important for India's future, and you know what? It's actually pretty interesting stuff, I promise.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
We're talking urea,
Yeah.
that fertilizer that helps crops grow big and strong. You know all about it.
I know urea and nitrogen-rich, essential for agriculture.
Exactly. And we've got this article from the Indian Express about India's push to be totally self-sufficient when it comes to making urea.
Oh, interesting.
Get this, the 2025 union budget just announced plans for a brand new urea plant, like a whole new plant.
Wow.
This would be their 8GH new urea plant since 2019.
Eighth. That's a lot.
Right. So obviously they're serious about this whole urea thing.
Yeah, you don't build 8 plants unless you mean business.
No kidding.
Yeah.
So big question here. What's driving this massive push for, making all this urea themselves?
Well, I think it's a really interesting development. It kind of speaks to a bigger story about India's goals, strategically,
Right.
where they want to be.
Okay, so let's unpack it. This article mentions all these new urea plants are being built some pretty specific places like Eastern India,
Okay.
Telangana,
Right.
and Rajasthan.
Uh-huh.
And these are all areas that they're hoping will see a huge boom in agriculture.
So like the new green revolution kind of areas.
Yeah, exactly. They're setting the stage. I'm sensing a pattern here. Why do you think they're so focused on these specific places?
I think it's all about creating a more self-reliant system,
Okay.
for agriculture. By boosting production in these regions, India can become less dependent on, imports.
Right.
Right? And it'll make sure there's a steady supply of urea for their farmers, especially in the areas where they really want to see more growth.
So it's like prepping for that new green revolution, you said?
Yep. Laying the groundwork.
Smart.
Yeah.
But here's where I get a little confused.
Oh.
This article mentions that to make urea, most of these plants use natural gas.
Uh-huh.
But a lot of that natural gas is imported.
Ah, I see.
So it's like they're building all these plants,
Yeah.
but still relying on imports.
Right.
Doesn't that seem a little counterintuitive?
Well, yeah, at first glance. But it's
Uh-oh.
actually a pretty smart move logistically. Think about it.
Okay.
India's been putting a lot of resources into their natural gas infrastructure, like building new LNG terminals and pipelines.
Uh-huh.
So importing that natural gas, which is what they use to make the urea,
Right.
it ends up being way cheaper than just importing the finished urea, especially when you factor in how expensive it is to transport stuff, to these places further inland.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Plus, it gives them more control, over the whole production process.
Ah, so it's like a double whammy, securing the raw materials and then making the urea themselves.
Exactly. Two
Wow.
birds, one stone.
It's a pretty clever two-pronged approach when you think about it.
It really is. And it seems to be working.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, this article highlights how much India's domestic urea production has gone up.
Okay.
Way up.
I'm ready for some impressive numbers. Hit me.
All right. In 2011-12, they were producing around 22 million tons.
Okay, 22 million tons.
And now,
Yeah.
in 2023-24, they're making a whopping 31.4 million tons.
Whoa, hold on.
That's huge.
22 to 31.4 million tons. That's
Yeah.
a massive jump. Really impressive.
Right. And it really shows how their self-reliant strategy is playing out, you know?
Oh, yeah, totally makes sense.
They're producing more, relying less on other countries.
But there's this one thing in the article I was curious about.
Yeah. What is it?
It says that urea imports actually peaked back in 2020-21.
Oh, huh. Interesting.
Yeah, and that seems kind of weird, right?
Yeah, it does seem a bit counterintuitive given the whole self-sufficiency thing.
Right, shouldn't they be importing less and less urea?
In theory, yes.
What do you think caused that spike?
Well, it's fascinating, isn't it? It just shows you, even with the best plans, you can't always predict what's going to happen in the world,
Yeah,
My best guess, it was probably the pandemic.
pandemic.
Remember all the chaos with supply chains?
Oh, yeah. Everything was a mess.
Exactly. Maybe it was just way harder to get finished urea from other countries, or the price went through the roof because everyone needed it.
Right. High demand.
Yeah, but it definitely highlights how risky it can be to rely too heavily on imports.
Yeah, even when you're working towards not needing them anymore.
Exactly.
Yeah, it really makes you think, I think you try to control things, but sometimes stuff just happens.
For sure. It really underscores why this whole self-sufficiency thing is so important for India.
Yeah.
I mean, they got to feed over 1 billion people. They can't be at the mercy of whatever's happening in the rest of the world,
Yeah, it's like they're saying, we're not going to let another pandemic mess with our food supply.
Right.
We're taking charge. That's a pretty strong message, don't you think?
Yeah, no, it's definitely a powerful statement. It's about security, resilience, you know,
Right.
like being independent.
So we've talked about, like, the logistics of it all, but I'm curious about the bigger picture. What are the long-term effects of all this?
Of India making all this urea themselves.
Exactly. Like, what's the impact going to be?
Well, if we like zoom out a bit and look at the bigger picture, this urea thing, it really lines up with some of India's big goals.
Okay, like what?
Well, first of all, it makes their food supply way more secure.
Makes sense.
With all that urea readily available, farmers can grow way more food.
More crops.
Exactly. Which means more food for everyone.
Right, so it's not just about having lots of urea.
No.
It's about making sure there's enough food for everyone in India.
100%. And when there's more food, guess what happens?
Prices go down.
Bingo! Food becomes more affordable for everyone.
Especially those who, like, really can't afford big price jumps and stuff.
Exactly. So it's a big deal.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Anything else? Like other big implications?
Well, there's the whole economic angle, too.
Oh, right, money matters.
Always. When they don't have to import as much urea, they save money. Valuable foreign currency, which can be used for other things.
Makes sense.
Plus, it creates jobs.
Oh, yeah, true. Where they're building these new plants.
Exactly. And that stimulates the economy, especially in rural areas.
So it's a win-win-win. More food, a stronger economy, and more jobs.
Pretty much. It's a pretty strategic move, if you ask me.
Yeah, big time. But of course, there are always two sides to every coin, right?
You got it.
What are some of the downsides to all this?
To making so much urea.
Yeah. Like, are there any challenges they might run into?
Well, you always got to think about the environmental impact.
Right, of course.
Even though natural gas is cleaner than some other fossil fuels, they're still burning a lot of it.
And that contributes to, like, climate change and all that.
Exactly. Greenhouse gas emissions.
Yeah.
And then there's the whole issue of the waste from making urea.
Oh, right. What do they do with all that?
Yeah, they have to manage that really carefully to avoid pollution and, environmental damage.
So it's not just about making urea.
No.
It's got to be sustainable, too.
Absolutely. It's got to be good for the environment in the long run.
Makes sense. Anything else to watch out for?
Well, there's the money side of things, too.
Oh, right, like the economics.
What if the price of urea drops, like, way down globally?
Yeah.
Can these new plants still compete? That's something the government has to think about,
Yeah, for sure.
They have to make sure these plants are sustainable, not just for the planet, but financially, too.
So it's kind of like walking a tightrope, isn't it?
Yeah, a little bit. They need that self-sufficiency, but it's got to be done in a way that protects the environment and makes sense economically.
It's a tough balancing act.
You said it.
Yeah.
And it's something that needs constant attention,
Like checking in, making adjustments.
Exactly. This isn't a one-time fix. It's an ongoing process.
Yeah, it's like they're trying to build something really big.
You mean like a house or something?
Yeah. Like you need the right materials, a solid foundation, and a plan that you can change, if you need to.
Yeah. It's a good way to think about it. And just like building a house, India needs to plan carefully to make this urea thing work.
Right.
They need skilled people to build and run those plants. And they have to keep a close eye on everything, making sure it's all going smoothly.
Okay, so to wrap things up, what's the main takeaway here? What should our listeners be thinking about after listening to all of this?
Well, I think the biggest thing to remember is that India is trying to do something really big here.
Right.
They want to make all the urea they need themselves. It's about making sure everyone has enough food, not having to rely on other countries, making the economy stronger, and basically taking control of their own future.
Yeah.
But it's not all smooth sailing. There are challenges, too.
Right, like those environmental concerns and economic stuff.
Exactly. They need to protect the environment and make sure these plants can stay afloat financially.
It's a complicated issue for sure.
It really is, but super important, too. It makes you think about how something as simple as fertilizer can affect so much. A whole country's economy, the environment, even people's lives.
Totally. Well, I'm definitely going to be keeping an eye on this whole urea situation in India now. It's a really interesting story, and it's not over yet.
Me too. It's worth following for sure, and it makes you wonder what other creative solutions are out there to help countries make sure they have enough food and protect the planet too.
Yeah, that's a great question. Something for everyone to think about. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. We'll be back soon with another one.